Mummies, zombies, vampires, and even a cursed mall. That's just some of what we will be talking about today as we cover the top 10 mysterious Chinese creepypastas you should fear. Starting off this list, in our number 10 spot, we have Bus 375. This story takes place on a bus referred to as the Midnight Bus or the Bus of Fragrant Hills because that's where it was headed to on its route. On midnight of November 14th, 1995, Bus 375, the final bus of the night, pulled into the bus terminal. This bus would go on to mysteriously disappear, but before it did, some strange things occurred. Before the bus left the terminal, two passengers got on the bus. One was a young man and one was an older man. The bus departed and headed on its route, but while headed to one of the last stops, the driver saw three shadowy figures waving at the side of the road, so the driver pulled over so that he could pick them up. As soon as he pulled over, the driver just got this strange feeling as if something wasn't right. His instincts were kicking in and he couldn't see their faces at all, but he decided to ignore these feelings and he let them on the bus. Shortly after these three people got on the bus, the old man picked a fight with the young man, claiming that he had stolen his wallet. Things escalated to the point where both men were kicked off of the bus, and only the driver and the three figures were left on as they sped away. Once off the bus, the old man explained to the young man that he likely just saved their lives because those three figures were actually ghosts. He had noticed that he couldn't see their feet and that they were floating. The following day, the two men would learn that Bus 375 had vanished and just 3 days later would be found at the bottom of the lake. Inside the bus, they found three decomposed corpses. What exactly happened on that bus after the two men got off remains an unsolved mystery. In our number 9 spot today, we have the cat-faced lady. So before we dive right into this legend, we have to go in with the understanding that there is this belief that comes from ancient times that says you should never let a cat near a corpse, especially a black cat. This is because once the cat crosses the corpse or the coffin, the dead will then become the undead, meaning a zombie. So legend goes that in 1995 there was this family that lived in a small mountain village. This family lived in a house that spanned generations, and one evening one of the older women passed away, but it is said that before her passing, the family was fighting. This led to her being found already passed away, but with a terrifying expression on her face. Apparently it was customary for those who passed away in such a way to have their closest relatives sit by them for the night before being buried. While the family had every intention of doing this, the woman's son and his wife both fell asleep while sitting by the woman's body. While they were asleep, a black cat ended up stepping over the body. The cat then passed away, but then the old woman came back to life as a cat-faced zombie who then took the lives of those next to her and fled from the village. It is said that the cat-faced lady is still lurking out there somewhere, waiting to chow down on a lonely, unsuspecting human. It is rumored that they can know if you were the victim of the cat-faced lady, because if so, you would be found with your belly full of rats. In our number 8 spot today, we have the Jade Pendant. It is said that back in the 1980s, there was a group of researchers who went out in search of some plant that had a mysterious neurotoxin. While searching for this plant, however, they found this Jade Pendant that they ended up bringing back with them. Months later, one of their colleagues just had this sense that something was wrong. Ever since they returned with this Jade Pendant, those who found it just weren't the same. He began to research into the Jade Pendant and found out the truth. This pendant is said to have a kind of power that can copy anything and produce a mirrored image of that thing, meaning that this pendant had made a mirrored copy of his teammates, and the real ones were likely out there, but had been killed by the pendant. In our number 7 spot today, we have Single Braid Road. The road that runs along the campus of the Chinese University of Hong Kong is referred to as Single Braid Road, and this is the story that gave it that name. On a cold night, a girl with a long braid in her hair went to great lengths in order to sneak into Hong Kong from the mainland with her boyfriend. They boarded a train to head into the city when they saw police on the train checking people's identification. Because she wasn't supposed to be there and had snuck in, she decided the only thing to do would be to try and jump off of the moving train. In a gruesome turn of events, her braid ended up getting stuck in the window and it ripped off all of this skin from her head. The girl stumbled onto the road where she collapsed and died. Throughout all of this, her boyfriend continued on the train, went into the city, got a new job, and pretended like the girl had never even existed. Flash forward to another night when a male student is walking alone on Single Braid Road when he sees a girl standing in the distance. He calls out to her, but she doesn't respond, so he begins to approach her and can see that she has a long braid in her hair. When he reaches her, he taps her on the shoulder, and when she turns around, he sees that she has no face. Then, She just disappears. They say that the ghost has appeared many times since then, but only male students can hear her. In our number 6 spot today, we have the zombies. Back in the mid-1990s, there were some archaeological teams that had unearthed 3 ancient bodies that were found near a temple. It was, of course, an incredible archaeological discovery, and they left the site feeling excited about the next day of excavations. Unfortunately, however, when they returned the next day, they discovered that the ancient bodies had disappeared. They had thought that the bodies were stolen by tomb robbers, but that changed just 5 days later when there were 5 mummies discovered at another place nearby, with 3 of them being the 3 that were previously found. These mummies weren't what you'd expect to find, however, as they were now the undead and had come back as zombies. It is said that these zombies bite people with sharp, long teeth, and if you get bit, one of 2 things will happen. You'll either die instantly, or slowly, you'll turn into one of them. In our number 5 spot today, we have the soup story. What kind of story about soup could be terrifying? Well, I'm about to tell you. There was a young couple who were in medical school together. They lived in the same dorm, but on different floors, and there was a strict study curfew that left them little to no time to see each other. It's also worth mentioning that this story comes from a time when there were no cell phones, so they also couldn't just slide into each other's DMs or have a quick FaceTime in order to catch up and chat. Every night, the girl would make oxtail soup, and because her boyfriend lived directly below her, she would send a cup of soup down from her window. They both loved this little tradition they had set up and made them feel even closer when they couldn't speak or see each other. One night, the boy received his soup, ate it, and fell asleep studying. The next day, he had time to go and see his girlfriend, so he headed up to her floor, but he couldn't find her. He ended up asking around and came to find that his girlfriend had actually died a few days before due to a sudden illness. He was of course suddenly overwhelmed with grief and the terrible news, but then it quickly hit him. If his girlfriend had died a few days ago, who had given him the soup the night before? In our number 4 spot today, we have the mall. This legend is about a mall that is said to hold a deadly curse. Since the mall was built, a number of mysterious deaths have been reported here, with some witnesses even claiming to see some sort of invisible force being the cause. According to those who live in the area, the curse of the mall has been around since it was first built, and that is because it was constructed on ancient grounds. Not just any ancient grounds, but the home of an ancient sacrificial chamber. Legend goes that those who built the mall ignored the signs that told them not to disturb the area, leaving the mall and those who enter it cursed. In our number 3 spot today, we have the vampire. Years ago, there was a scientist who was working in a biology lab at a research institute. Through some horrible mishap, this scientist ended up consuming a sort of germ that infected him with a terrible illness. It was one that made him have a need to drink the blood of mammals in order to survive. Because this scientist was one who was held in quite a high regard and he was greatly respected, he was able to keep the story of this mishap a secret. At first, he lived off of human blood he could find at the research lab, but soon he was running low on stock. He then began to drink rat blood, but that was not enough to fill his appetite, which had him falling into the madness of hunger. He began to take his thirst to humans, and he started to target those walking home alone at night. Some versions of this story claim that he was killed by the authorities, but there are many people out there who believe that people are just saying that so that there isn't panic. There are many people who believe he still lurks out there. In our number 2 spot today, we have the shop. This story starts off at a small steamed bun shop in 1982. The shop sold some tasty steamed buns with meat inside of them for quite cheap, so it was a local favorite. There were some days where the shop was selling hundreds of their buns, but one mystery prevailed. People could not figure out where they were getting their meat from that allowed them to sell these buns for so cheap. Eventually, the business was doing so well that the shop began hiring new employees, many of which were from out of town. Legend says that some of these employees started to turn up missing. Since they were from out of town, no one really knew who to contact for them, so this kept going on for quite some time. You might have guessed it, but legend goes that it was later revealed that this shop had been using the meat of these missing employees in their food, and that is how they were able to sell the buns for so cheap. This was all discovered after both the local customers and police began to get suspicious of the high staff changeover rate, and some customers even complained of finding fingernails in their food. The owner just said it was an accident and that he had fired the employee who did it. No one knew what real sinister things were going on behind the scenes. In our number 1 spot today, we have the Lotus Pond. This story starts off with a young couple who were so in love that they planned to run away together and elope. They made a plan to meet at midnight at the Lotus Pond, and from there they would leave and go start their lives together. When the girl showed up at midnight, she waited for so long, but the boy never showed up. She left the pond and went back into town when she spotted her boyfriend with another woman. She was so heartbroken and upset that she began crying and could not stop. She was so distraught that she went back to the Lotus Pond where they had planned to meet, and she drowned herself. Months later, another couple had planned to meet at the Lotus Pond. The boy got to the pond early and was waiting for his girlfriend to arrive when he heard a female voice say, "I asked you to meet me at midnight, didn't I?" The boy was really confused because this wasn't the meeting time that him and his partner had discussed, and he responded, "No." All of a sudden, two pale white hands reached out of the water and dragged him under the pond, also drowning him. Ever since then, it is said if you are at the Lotus Pond at midnight and you encounter a girl or hear her voice, do not answer her questions or even look at her, or she will get you too. Alright guys, that has been our list for today. Thanks so much for checking it out. I've been your host today, Olivia Kozlowski, and I'll see you next time. Bye!